Death brought him back to take revenge on the lizard race for the enslavement of humans in a distant future. Earth no longer belonged to humanity. It had been taken from them by an advanced, ruthless alien race known as the Szar, a race of powerful lizards with technology far beyond what humans had ever imagined. Their arrival had been swift, overwhelming, and brutal. The human race, once dominant on their own planet, was reduced to mere slaves in their own cities, their once proud civilization crumbling beneath the cold, reptilian claws of their new masters. For years, humanity had fought back. Resistance movements were born in the shadows, growing from whispered promises of freedom to full-scale battles in the streets. They fought with all they had, but each day that passed saw more of their forces wiped out by the Szar. Despite their efforts, the humans couldn't stop the Szar from tightening their grip on Earth. No matter how many they lost, the Szar remained a step ahead. They had resources, technology, and an army that seemed endless. Among the many heroes who had risen during this desperate time, there was one man who stood above them all, Captain Aiden Cross. He had once been a simple soldier, but his bravery, leadership, and unmatched combat skills had earned him a place at the heart of the human resistance. His face was known in every hidden camp, every safe house, and to every fighter who had picked up arms to free their people. He had led the charge in countless battles, always pushing forward, always risking his life for the cause. His name became a symbol of hope, a rallying cry for those who still believed that humanity could rise again. But despite all his victories, even Aiden could not escape the inevitable. It was during the final stand to reclaim the last human stronghold that he met his end. The Szar had known they were coming. They had laid a trap. As Aiden fought his way through wave after wave of enemies, the betrayal was swift. His squad was ambushed, surrounded by the Szar's elite warriors. Aiden fought valiantly, but there were too many. With a final, devastating strike, he fell. The battlefield fell silent as the Szar soldiers began to mop up the remaining resistance. Aiden Cross, the last hope of humanity, was dead. And with his death, the light of resistance seemed to flicker and fade, leaving only the shadow of the alien empire to rule over Earth. Yet death was not the end for Aiden. In the hidden corners of the Earth, in the forgotten laboratories and darkened temples of the old world, there were still those who believed that humanity's fight was not over. There were whispers of ancient technologies, of forbidden experiments designed to cheat death itself. Among the scattered few who still fought for the human race, a group of scientists and rebels had been working tirelessly to bring Aiden back. They knew it was risky. The process they intended to use had been outlawed centuries ago. It was untested, dangerous, and could easily end in failure. But they had no other choice. Without Aiden, they knew that humanity's hope was gone. So they made the decision to attempt the impossible, to resurrect the hero who had once fought to save them. Aiden's body was brought to a hidden laboratory deep beneath the ruins of a long-abandoned city. The machine that would bring him back to life was a complex and terrifying creation. It was built using remnants of humanity's finest minds, ancient technology mixed with modern innovations, a strange hybrid that defied both science and nature. The scientists didn't know exactly how it worked, only that it had the potential to bring someone back from the dead. The process began. Aiden's lifeless body was hooked up to the machines, and a low hum filled the chamber. Sparks of light danced through the wires as the machine powered up. The scientists held their breath as they activated the resurrection protocol, unsure of what would happen. For long minutes, nothing changed. But then, slowly, his chest began to rise and fall with shallow breaths. His fingers twitched. His eyes fluttered open, though they were empty and unfocused. It wasn't the same Aiden Cross that had died on the battlefield. The process had altered him. His skin glowed with a faint, unnatural light, and his eyes burned with an otherworldly energy. He felt different, stronger, yet there was something cold in the pit of his stomach, a strange emptiness that hadn't been there before. His mind was clear, but it was also distant, as if the resurrection had unlocked a door he wasn't yet ready to walk through. "Captain Cross," one of the scientists said, his voice trembling as he looked at the man who had once been their hero. "You're alive." Aiden's lips parted, but no words came out at first. He felt like a stranger in his own body, as if he had been thrust into a role he didn't fully understand. His muscles ached as if they hadn't been used in years, yet they were stronger than he could ever remember. He stood up, his movements slow but deliberate as he tried to gather his bearings. "Alive," Aiden whispered, his voice hoarse. He glanced down at his hands, clenching and unclenching his fingers. "I was dead. How?" The scientists explained the process to him. Their voices hurried as they described the ancient technology they had used to bring him back. But all Aiden could focus on was one thing: the war, the S-Zar, the human race. His thoughts were consumed with the need to fight, to lead once more, to take revenge on those who had destroyed everything he had fought for. The humans in the lab watched him closely, knowing that they had brought back more than just a soldier. Aiden Cross was their hope, their chance to reclaim what had been lost. But they also knew that the man standing before them wasn't the same. He had returned with a new purpose, a darker hunger that they couldn't yet understand. It was as if something had awakened inside him, something that had been dormant in his original life. But what would it mean for the future of humanity? "I need to see it," Aiden said abruptly, his voice colder now, sharper. "The S-Zar, I need to see what's left of them." The scientists nodded, understanding the fire burning in his chest. They had expected nothing less. Aiden was no longer the man who had fallen in battle. He was something new, something more powerful, something that would stop at nothing to see his vengeance fulfilled. Aiden stood on the balcony of the ruined city, looking out over the horizon. The wind, carrying the scent of Earth's decay, blew through his short-cropped hair. He could feel the cold touch of the wind against his skin, yet it didn't matter to him. His mind was focused on the task ahead. His body, though changed by the resurrection, was now brimming with power that he hadn't had in his previous life. Every muscle, every nerve, every fiber of his being felt heightened, as if he was a weapon forged for a single purpose: vengeance. He could feel the pull of the S-Zar in his blood, an old enemy, one that he had known far too well. But now it was different. He wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was something more. Something that would not stop until every last S-Zar paid for what they had done. The death of his comrades, the fall of Earth, it was all too much to forget, too much to forgive. Behind him, the scientists and rebels watched in silence. They had been the ones to bring him back, the ones who had dared to go against the very laws of nature. And now they looked at him with a mix of awe and fear. They knew he was their last hope, but they also knew that with the power he now held, he could easily become a force they couldn't control. "Aiden," one of the scientists, Dr. Mara Wright, stepped forward hesitantly. "You need to rest, your body, it's been through a lot." Aiden turned his head, locking his eyes onto her. His gaze was piercing, almost unblinking. "I don't need rest," he replied coldly. "I need to see the enemy, the S-Zar. Where are they, Doctor?" Wright took a step back, her heart racing. "The S-Zar, they've established a stronghold near the last human city. It's heavily guarded. There's no way in without attracting their attention." Aiden nodded, already knowing what he had to do. He had faced the S-Zar before, but now they would be facing something different. He wasn't the man who had fallen in the battle years ago. He was something more, something unstoppable. "I don't care about their defenses," Aiden said, his voice low and determined. "I'll destroy everything they've built." With that, Aiden turned away from the balcony and headed towards the door, his boots echoing against the cold floor. His mission was clear: to confront the S-Zar, to show them that humanity was not yet finished. He had been brought back to life for a reason, and that reason was revenge. The journey to the human stronghold took several days. Along the way, Aiden encountered pockets of resistance, groups of humans, scattered and broken, still fighting, still holding on to the hope of freedom. They all knew of the legend of Aiden Cross, the hero who had led humanity's fight. Now he was back, and he was more powerful than ever before. For the first time in years, the resistance felt a spark of hope. But as Aiden made his way toward the stronghold, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The world had changed since his death, and the S-Zar had grown even more powerful. The air was thick with tension, and the land itself seemed to mourn the loss of its once vibrant life. But Aiden pushed forward. His mind was clear. He would not stop until the S-Zar were gone. When they reached the stronghold, the rebels were quick to prepare for an attack. They had an old transport ship, one that had been salvaged from the remnants of Earth's fallen cities. It was battered, its hull patched together with scrap metal, but it would get them to the heart of the S-Zar's domain. Aiden climbed into the cockpit, feeling the weight of the controls beneath his fingers. This was no longer a mission to rescue humanity. It was a mission to destroy their oppressors. "Ready?" One of the rebel leaders asked, his voice shaky but determined. Aiden didn't answer with words. He simply nodded, and the engines of the ship roared to life, cutting through the air with a force that echoed across the wastelands. The journey was long, and the tension in the ship was palpable. As they flew closer to the SR stronghold, Aiden's mind began to sharpen. He could feel his powers increasing, growing stronger with each passing minute. His senses were more acute now, and his thoughts were clear, driven by a single purpose. His fingers curled into fists as he prepared himself for what was to come. When they finally reached the outskirts of the stronghold, Aiden ordered the ship to land. The rebels were nervous, unsure of how they would breach the heavily fortified walls of the SR base. But Aiden had no doubt. He could feel the pulse of the enemy, the vibrations of their technology, the sound of their machinery. "We'll make it through," Aiden said, his voice calm and certain. "Trust me." They exited the ship and made their way toward the stronghold under the cover of night. The SR didn't seem to notice them at first, but Aiden knew they wouldn't be able to hide forever. As they approached the walls, Aiden's senses flared. The SR were everywhere, patrolling, guarding, waiting for any sign of resistance. Without warning, Aiden moved. His body seemed to blur with motion as he sprinted forward, his newfound strength propelling him through the night air. He was like a shadow, faster than any SR could react. In moments, he was on top of the first wall, tearing through the guards with an unstoppable fury. His fists shattered armor and bones alike as he made his way deeper into the compound. The rebels followed behind him, more hesitant but gaining confidence with each step. They had never seen anything like this before, Aiden's power, his speed, his ferocity. He was a one-man army, and they were simply following in his wake. It wasn't long before they reached the central command center. Aiden kicked down the heavy doors, his eyes burning with an intense, unrelenting fire. The SR inside were caught off guard, but they quickly recovered, drawing their weapons and preparing to defend their territory. Aiden didn't hesitate. With a roar, he charged forward, his hands glowing with a strange energy as he fought through the guards. The SR tried to retaliate, but they were no match for him. His enhanced strength and speed overwhelmed them. They couldn't even keep up with his movements. Aiden tore through them with a relentless precision, each strike landing with deadly force. As the last of the SR guards fell to the ground, Aiden stood amidst the wreckage. His chest heaved with the exertion, but his eyes remained cold, focused on the task at hand. The SR were powerful, yes, but they had underestimated humanity. They had underestimated him. He looked around at the rebels who had followed him. They stood in awe, their faces reflecting both fear and admiration. They had witnessed Aiden's power firsthand, and they knew that they were no longer alone in this fight. Humanity's greatest hero had returned to lead them. "Get the control center," Aiden said, his voice unwavering. "We're not done yet." As Aiden and the rebels moved deeper into the SR stronghold, the air grew thick with tension. The central command center, where the heart of the SR's operations lay, was only a few corridors away. They had encountered little resistance since entering, a strange and unsettling silence hanging in the air. Aiden felt his senses sharpen, his every step echoing through the hallways as they approached the inner sanctum of their enemy. The rebel soldiers followed behind him, hesitant but emboldened by Aiden's relentless drive. He had already taken down a dozen SR soldiers without breaking a sweat, and his presence alone had turned the tide for them. They were no longer the disorganized group of survivors they had been. They were now a unit, strengthened by Aiden's leadership and raw power. The command center doors loomed ahead. They were heavily reinforced, unlike anything the rebels had encountered before. The technology was alien, more sophisticated than anything humanity had ever produced, and yet Aiden felt no fear. The SR had underestimated him, and now they would pay for it. "Stand back," Aiden commanded, his voice low but authoritative. With a single swipe of his hand, he slammed his fist into the thick metal door. There was a loud crash, and the door buckled under the force of his strike. The sound of bending metal reverberated through the hall, and the heavy door swung open with a groan. Inside, the command center was a chaotic mess of screens, blinking lights, and SR officials scrambling to respond to the sudden breach. The room was filled with soldiers, officers, and engineers, all caught off guard by the intrusion. It wasn't long before they realized that the one who had broken through their defenses was no mere human. He was something far more dangerous. Aiden didn't hesitate. He charged into the room, his body moving with unnatural speed, faster than anyone could react. His fists collided with the first SZAR officer who tried to raise a weapon, shattering the alien's body like glass. The other SZAR were frozen for only a moment, unsure of how to respond. Aiden didn't give them the time to think. He moved like a blur, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to dodge and weave through gunfire and energy blasts with ease. His strikes were precise, each hit landing with deadly accuracy. The SZAR were formidable warriors, but against Aiden they were nothing more than targets. His body seemed to vibrate with power, a force beyond anything he had ever felt before. He was unstoppable. The rebel soldiers who had been trailing behind him followed with newfound courage. They picked off the remaining SZAR, taking advantage of the chaos Aiden had created. But it was clear that the battle had already been decided. Aiden was in control, and nothing could stand in his way. As the last of the SZAR soldiers fell, Aiden stood amidst the wreckage, his chest heaving with the exertion of the battle. He didn't feel tired. He didn't feel anything. All he could think about was what came next, the destruction of the SZAR's leadership. A lone SZAR officer, seemingly unshaken by the chaos around him, stepped forward. He was taller than the others, his scales glinting in the dim light. His eyes locked onto Aiden S., and for a moment there was a strange, unsettling silence between them. The officer didn't speak. Instead, he reached for something hidden beneath his cloak, a device glowing faintly with an alien energy. Aiden's instincts flared. Before the officer could activate the device, Aiden was on him. His hand shot out, grabbing the officer by the throat and lifting him off the ground with ease. The officer's eyes widened in fear as he clawed at Aiden's hand, but it was no use. Aiden's grip was unbreakable. "You'll tell me everything," Aiden said coldly, his voice like ice. "Where is the Vezir?" The SZAR officer's eyes flickered with panic. The Vezir, the leader of the SZAR, was the mastermind behind the enslavement of humanity. If Aiden could find him, he could finally bring the war to an end. The officer's fear deepened as he realized the truth. Aiden wasn't just some warrior. He was the weapon that could destroy the SZAR empire. "The Vezir is on Vierks," the officer gasped, his voice strained. "He's preparing to launch the final assault on your kind. You cannot stop him." Aiden's eyes burned with anger. Vierks, the heart of the SZAR empire, the place where their leader, the Vezir, planned to finish what he had started. Aiden's mind raced with the knowledge of what he had to do next. He had already killed so many SZAR, but the true battle lay ahead on the homeworld of their leaders. Without a second thought, Aiden slammed the officer to the ground. He didn't need to hear any more. The officer had given him all the information he needed. With a single glance at the rebel soldiers, Aiden motioned for them to follow. "We're going to Vierks," he said, his voice unwavering. "This ends now." The rebels, still processing what had just transpired, quickly rallied behind him. There was no question about it. Aiden had proven himself time and again, and now he was leading them to the heart of the SZAR empire. They had fought for years, but they had never truly believed they could win. Now they had Aiden on their side, their last hope, their final weapon. The journey to Vierks was long, but it gave Aiden time to reflect on what had happened. He had never thought he would return from the grave, never imagined that he would be the one to lead humanity's last stand. He had died once, and now he had come back. But what had changed? His body, his strength, these were all gifts, but they were also burdens. He had been resurrected, but was it really him? Was he still the man who had led the fight against the SZAR, or was he something else now? Something far more dangerous. He could feel the power coursing through his veins, but it was a cold power. A power that made him feel distant, detached. He had no time to dwell on these thoughts. The war was far from over, and the Vezir's forces were preparing to strike. Humanity had lost so much, but they had never given up. Now, with Aiden at the helm, they would fight for their freedom once again. When they arrived at Vierks, the capital of the SZAR empire, Aiden's eyes narrowed. The planet was a fortress, its surface covered in miles of defensive structures. There was no question that this would be the hardest battle they had ever fought. But Aiden was ready. He had no fear. The Vezir's reign was coming to an end. "We'll break through," Aiden said firmly. "We'll bring this empire down." The rebels stood by his side, their resolve solidifying with every word he spoke. They knew they were about to face their greatest challenge, but they also knew that they were no longer alone. Aiden Cross, the fallen hero who had returned to take revenge, was leading them. With him, they would win. They had no other choice. Aiden and his group had arrived at Vierks under the cover of darkness. The planet loomed large in the distance, its surface covered in a labyrinth of SR fortifications. As they approached, the enormity of the task ahead weighed heavily on Aiden's mind. This was the heart of the SR Empire, the last stronghold that needed to fall for humanity to be free. He had come so far, but he knew this battle would be unlike anything they had faced before. The SR, with their advanced technology, had turned Vierks into a nearly impenetrable fortress. Aiden's mind was sharp, calculating, as he studied the complex web of defenses. They had no choice but to push forward. If they hesitated, the SR would regroup and humanity's last chance would slip away. Aiden's eyes burned with the fire of determination. He had already sacrificed so much: his life, his friends, his planet. He wasn't about to let the SR stand in the way of humanity's future. The rebels, despite their fears, looked to him for guidance. They had seen his strength and resolve in the battle on the SR stronghold, and now they believed that, with him, they could win. They landed their ship in a hidden valley just outside the perimeter of Vierks' capital. The air was heavy with anticipation as the rebels prepared for the final assault. Aiden had made it clear this was not just about taking down the SR, this was about ending their reign of terror once and for all. "Get ready," Aiden said as he checked his gear. His voice was steady, but there was an unmistakable edge to it. "We strike fast and hard. The Vezir won't see us coming." The rebels nodded in unison, tightening their grips on their weapons. They had spent years fighting on the edges, but now, with Aiden leading them, they felt the power of their unity. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for vengeance, for freedom, and for their future. Aiden felt the cold power flowing through him, his senses heightened to an almost unbearable degree. He could feel the vibrations of the SR soldiers, movements through the ground, the hum of their energy shields, and the heat of their weapons. His mind was sharp, focused. He could hear every sound in the air, every whisper of movement. The first wave of their attack came without warning. Aiden led the charge, his enhanced strength propelling him forward. He moved faster than any human had a right to, his body a blur as he tore through the SR defenses with brutal efficiency. His fist struck with the power of a battering ram, tearing through armor and breaking bones. His eyes blazed with a cold, unrelenting fire as he cut a path through the enemy lines. The SR fought back fiercely, but they were no match for Aiden's fury. Their weapons couldn't pierce his enhanced skin, and their attacks barely slowed him. He was a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless. His soldiers, seeing the devastation he caused, followed his lead without hesitation. They surged forward with renewed vigor, emboldened by his example. The battle for Vierks raged on, and as Aiden pushed deeper into the heart of the city, the SR began to realize the scale of the threat they faced. They had never seen anything like Aiden before. He was not just a soldier, he was their nightmare come to life. The rebels, empowered by his strength, fought with all their might, and the SR were slowly but surely driven back. But even as the tide turned in their favor, Aiden could feel the presence of something much more dangerous: the Vezir. The leader of the SR Empire was no ordinary being. He was a force of darkness, a being whose power surpassed anything Aiden had ever encountered. Aiden knew that he was nearing the final confrontation, the moment when everything would come to a head. "Keep moving," Aiden ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We have to reach the Vezir's stronghold. The SR won't stop until they have him." The rebels, though exhausted, pressed on. They fought through waves of SR soldiers, each one more determined than the last. The Vezir, Aiden knew, would not go down easily. The SR leader was a master of dark, alien technology, and he had no intention of letting his empire fall without a fight. They made their way through the heart of the city, the walls now crumbling under the weight of their assault. The SR were scrambling, desperate to defend their leader, but it was too late. Aiden had already made his move. They reached the Vezir's fortress, a towering structure that seemed to pierce the sky. The walls were lined with SR soldiers, their weapons raised and ready. But Aiden felt no fear. His body was alive with power, his mind focused on one thing: the end of the SR reign. "This is it," Aiden muttered, stepping forward. "We end this now." With a roar, he charged forward, his body a blur of motion. The SR soldiers tried to stop him, but they were no match for his enhanced strength and speed. He tore through them like they were made of paper, his fists shattering armor and bone with every blow. The rebels followed close behind, picking off any Eszar that dared to get in their way. At the heart of the fortress, Aiden finally saw him, the Vezir. The leader of the Eszar Empire stood tall, his massive form cloaked in dark, shimmering armor. His eyes glowed with a cold, calculating fury as he watched Aiden approach. "You think you can defeat me, human?" The Vezir's voice echoed in the chamber, his words a chilling growl. "You are nothing but a fleeting moment in the vastness of the universe." Aiden's eyes burned with anger. "I'm not just a moment," he said, his voice full of fire. "I'm the end of everything you've built." The Vezir laughed, a sound that sent shivers down Aiden's spine. He raised his hand, and the air around them seemed to warp with dark energy. Aiden could feel the power radiating from the Vezir, a force unlike anything he had ever experienced. But he didn't flinch. He didn't hesitate. With a roar, Aiden surged forward, his body moving with the power of a storm. The Vezir raised his weapon, a massive alien blade, and struck with the speed of lightning. But Aiden was faster. He dodged the Vezir's strike, moving with the agility of a predator. His fist slammed into the Vezir's side, sending the Eszar leader staggering back. The Vezir growled in fury and retaliated with a series of strikes, each one faster and more powerful than the last. Aiden blocked and dodged, his enhanced reflexes allowing him to stay one step ahead. The battle between them was nothing short of a clash of titans, a struggle between pure strength and alien technology. But in the end, Aiden's willpower was stronger. With a final, devastating blow, he sent the Vezir crashing to the ground. The leader of the Eszar Empire, the one who had caused so much pain and suffering, was defeated. Aiden stood over him, breathing heavily but unbroken. The Eszar had lost. Humanity had won. Aiden stood over the fallen body of the Vezir, his chest heaving with every breath. The battle was over, and the leader of the Eszar Empire lay defeated at his feet. The once proud tyrant who had enslaved humanity and other races was no more. The Eszar had lost. But even in the silence that followed, Aiden felt no satisfaction. The price had been too high. The years of war, the countless lives lost, and the destruction of Earth, all of it had led to this moment. But it had cost him more than he was willing to admit. The Vezir's body was still twitching, the dark energy that had sustained him now fading away. Aiden stepped back, wiping the sweat from his brow as the reality of the moment began to sink in. The Eszar were finished, their empire shattered. But for the first time in a long while, Aiden felt a deep emptiness inside. He wasn't sure if it was the loss of humanity's last hope or the realization that his fight had come to an end. "Is it over?" one of the rebel soldiers asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. Aiden nodded, his gaze never leaving the Vezir's body. "Yes, it's over." But as Aiden stood there, surrounded by the wreckage of the Eszar fortress, something stirred in the back of his mind. The Vezir was dead, but the destruction they had wrought had left Earth a shadow of what it once was. Humanity had won, but at what cost? The planet they had fought for was barely recognizable. Cities lay in ruins, forests were burning, and the oceans were polluted with the remnants of countless wars. He had been brought back to life to defeat the Eszar, but now that they were gone, Aiden wondered what his purpose was. Was he just a weapon, a tool created for vengeance? Had he become nothing more than the thing he had fought against, something fueled by rage, not compassion? "Aiden," Dr. Myra Wright's voice broke through his thoughts. She stepped forward cautiously, her eyes filled with a mixture of concern and relief. "Are you okay?" Aiden turned to look at her. Her face was tired, her hair disheveled, but her eyes still carried the same spark they had when they first revived him. She had been by his side throughout it all, through the battles, the betrayals, and the chaos. She had helped bring him back, but even now, Aiden could see the toll the war had taken on her as well. She had believed in him, in the idea that humanity could still win. But now, as the dust settled, he could see the uncertainty in her gaze. "I don't know what's next," Aiden admitted quietly. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now that the fighting is over." Mara stepped closer, her hand resting gently on his arm. "You've done more than anyone could have asked, Aiden. You've given humanity a chance to rebuild. But the world isn't going to fix itself overnight. We have to work together, all of us, to heal." Aiden looked out over the ruins of the Eszar stronghold. His mind was still reeling from everything that had happened, the rush of battle, the taste of victory, but it all felt hollow. The destruction, the pain, it was everywhere. He had won, but he had also lost so much. "We're all broken, Aiden," Mara said softly, as if sensing his thoughts. "But we can rebuild. We can start fresh. It's going to take time, but the war is over, and you've given us the opportunity to do that." Aiden turned to face her fully, meeting her eyes. He had been driven by a need for vengeance, for justice. But now, in this moment of peace, he realized that it wasn't enough. He couldn't keep living in the past, chasing after ghosts. The world had to move forward, and so did he. He had to find a new purpose, one that wasn't defined by war. "You're right," Aiden said, his voice stronger now, the weight of his burden finally lifting. "I've done what I came to do, but now it's time for the rest of humanity to step up." Myra smiled softly, a look of pride in her eyes. "We'll rebuild together, one step at a time." The rebels around them began to gather, some tending to the wounded, others assessing the damage. The battle was over, but the real work had just begun. Aiden knew that the coming years would be hard. The scars of the war ran deep, and the world would take time to heal. But for the first time in a long while, Aiden felt a flicker of hope. The SZAR were gone, and humanity had survived. It was no longer about fighting for survival or revenge. It was about building a future, a new beginning for all the people who had been affected by the war. The battle had been won, but the true challenge was yet to come. Days passed, and the rebel forces began to reclaim what had been lost. They worked tirelessly to restore what the SZAR had destroyed, rebuilding cities, clearing the poisoned waters, and planting new forests. It was a long and difficult process, but there was a sense of unity now, a shared purpose. People came together not just to survive, but to create something better. Aiden had played his part. He had been the weapon, the one who had delivered the final blow. But now he took a step back. He couldn't be the hero anymore. Humanity needed to heal, and they couldn't do it with a man who had been born out of vengeance. He needed to find his place in this new world, not as a warrior, but as a man who could help rebuild what had been lost. In the months that followed, Aiden traveled across the world, meeting survivors, helping where he could. He wasn't a leader anymore, but he wasn't alone either. Everywhere he went, people thanked him for his bravery, for his sacrifice. But Aiden didn't seek praise. He had done what he had to do, and now he wanted to see humanity thrive once more. One day, as he stood on a hill overlooking a valley that had once been a battlefield, he saw something he hadn't expected. Children were playing. The ruins of the old world were still visible in the distance, but in the valley below, life was slowly returning. People were rebuilding, planting new crops and starting new families. Aiden watched as the children laughed, their voices carrying on the wind. It was a sound he hadn't heard in so long. For the first time since his resurrection, Aiden allowed himself to feel a sense of peace. The world wasn't perfect. It would never be the same as it once was, but it was alive. Humanity had a future again, and that was something worth fighting for. The SZAR were gone, and so was his thirst for revenge. In its place, Aiden found a new purpose. He would help humanity rebuild, but he would do it in a way that honored those who had fallen. The war had ended, but Aiden's journey had only just begun. He would fight for peace, for a future where humanity could thrive without the shadow of the SZAR hanging over them. As he watched the sun set over the valley, Aiden finally allowed himself to smile. The darkness was over, and the light of a new day had begun.